this whole like using other people's money, that's great in theory, but I do private lending. There's no fucking chance that if you can't show me some sort of credibility, I'm going to give you my fucking money. Had 2 people ask me the same fucking question yesterday alone.
Okay.
How did I buy 15 condos at once? And the same question was asked, but phrased a little different. What was my first investment property?
Yeah.
So, actually, what, is that the actual question? How did I? Okay, so he watched a video. This one particular guy watched a video. It was like a throwback Thursday that I have on Dan Crosby CEO on my Instagram page, and it was I don't remember what it was about. It was explaining my first real estate deal.
Yeah.
So he kind of framed it a little bit different. I think in the video I went over what was my first deal, not how I got my first deal. So my first real estate deal was 14 condos in the Lagoyo building, Windsor, Ontario, on Riverside Drive. I still own 8 condos there, and the 8 that I still own are facing the water. I sold 7 that were not facing the water. The original deal was for 14, and I'm pretty sure that the 14 cost me like $938,000 all in. I bought some that was like, 80 grand, that were like a 2-bedroom, cream of the crop, high up in the building, directly facing the Renaissance Center. And then I bought other ones that were like 20 grand. I bought the 15th condo about 2 months later after that for $22,000, $22,000 or $24,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it was like a 1-bed. I ended up selling that one particular condo. I remember the sale specifically. I sold that condo for like, I don't even know, like like 150. Like not like, 10 years later maybe. So that was my first real estate deal. How I got the money. This is going to be groundbreaking.
Well, how'd you come across the deal in the first place? That would be like an interesting place to start.
Yeah. So I came across the deal because I had started. Remember I told you I started my website first for the supplement company. It wasn't doing well at all. I was having somebody else make my product. And I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? I opened a store. When I opened the store, and I did this like very, like right around the same time. I did it for sure in the same year. I might have done it within like a 3 or 4 month window of each other. When I opened up the store, there was a guy that owned the plaza named Marco Savoni. And in and around that time, I started hearing about him, that he had like hundreds of units around town, and he was like a big landlord around town. And I was very interested in real estate at the time as well. And, he would come in for a few months and we kind of chatted up because he was always interested in kind of getting in better shape and stuff like that. And I was in really good shape at the time. And he was, picking my brain about, that kind of stuff. And then I would want to pick his brain about real estate, and he'd be like, I got to go. Right. So it got to a point where I wanted to sit down with him and talk real estate. So I withheld rent, and I ended up withholding rent for like months, like 2-3 months. And finally he agreed to sit down with me. And I bring the rent to the shop with me every day, or every time he would come to collect, like the couple times that he came to collect. And I'd be like, listen, it's here. Let's go have a drink or something so that we can talk real estate. Give me an hour of your time, and then you'll get your money. I'll actually bring the rent money to the meeting when we're going to sit down. So we ended up doing it. We sat down at Tim Hortons on Dougal and Cabana, which ironically, he now owns that plaza as well. He didn't come. Yeah, there was like no Rain Man session going on there. He wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know or didn't already see or read or whatever. It was only, I guess, reiterating and confirming what I have read in real life. So,
do you remember like a couple of those things?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it wasn't any kind of like. He's a very high level thinker. It was basically like his methodology is only buy premium properties and premium locations. That's it. Because he has gone through owning the shittiest of shit properties in Windsor, West End, Sandwich Street, East End, Wyandotte. Like, he's gone through all of that stuff in his earlier years, and he felt like it wasn't worth it. The management, the turnover, he would much rather be in really good locations, really good properties, and not have the level of bullshit. And he's also right from a perspective of, especially in a downturn like this that we're experiencing now, those properties tend to keep their values much longer and rebound much quicker. Also, they tend to appreciate more. So he's right. Not that there's not money to be made in lower income areas or lower class properties. It really depends on what type of strategies you're going for. But I'm of the same mentality. I don't want to own dog shit properties and dog shit locations. Yeah. So the whole conversation was basically like, great properties and great locations. That's it. In cash flow, buy for cash flow. It's the same thing. Like, it's still what I preach, but it's not like that kind of strategy is unknown. So it wasn't like any groundbreaking information. It was simply good to get in front of somebody that was local, because the circles that I ran with or the people that I knew were not of this kind of status or wealth or capable of building this much wealth, this and that. This was by far like the richest guy I've ever talked to. So it was, it was interesting sitting with somebody like that, and then also realizing, oh, well, he's just a normal guy. So as a young person, and I was probably about 22, 23 years old at the time, as a young person, it was really interesting sitting down with somebody like that. Yeah. Again, nothing ended up coming from that conversation, but what did come from that and this encounter was, I bought that package of property, my first portfolio of 14 condos, from him.
Why was he offloading it?
Because it was a 2008 market crash in the U.S., but we were still being affected in Canada, in specifically Windsor. And again, let me explain this. We weren't going through the same financial crisis in Windsor. What we were going through was a lot of the automotive sector being affected by that crisis from the United States. Those companies being, U.S. headquartered companies, and Windsor having, the big three. There was still like big three plants in Windsor. Not a lot of them.
Didn't one or two of them declare bankruptcy too?
I don't know about that time, but a lot of like feeder plants did.
Yeah.
So Windsor was big, is still big with tool and die and mold, which feeds the big three. Yeah. So all these feeder plants were having a really rough time because the big three were going through a rough time, and Windsor was really reliant on the automotive sector. So Marco, as the chips were falling at that point in time, he was offloading his properties. So I tried to actually buy his entire portfolio that he was selling. So he offloaded, oh man, I want to say like 150 units or like maybe over 100 units at that time. I don't know exactly how many. And I was like,
were a lot of them like multifamily properties?
They were all multifamily. So I was doing everything in my power to be like, I think he was selling everything for like 11 or 12 million bucks. So I was doing everything, but that wasn't all of his portfolio. He was keeping the best stuff. I was trying to buy whatever he was selling, I was trying to buy his entire portfolio, and I was trying so hard to do like a VTB with him. He just wasn't having it, right? So, yeah, I remember this actually. I remember thinking this. I remember strategizing while I was making protein, like by myself, thinking like, how the fuck can I do this? Because I used to mix all this shit. So I was like, fucking, because at that point then, I had made a really quick switch from like not having my stuff made by other people, the supplement stuff, and me doing it. So I was like, fucking, I remember actually strategizing in my head and calling him like 5 times in that one day, being like, how can we do this? How can we do this? And he's like, listen, man, like it ain't gonna work. So what I ended up doing was buying those 14 condos from him. We didn't do a VTB. I ended up getting financing from the bank. But the key takeaway here is the way that I got the money for the down payment was I worked my fucking ass off for like since I was 8 years old delivering papers, 10 years old. I delivered papers up until high school. Like literally I would deliver papers before I would go to school, come home, go to Zayre's because I got a job in the produce department. I would go to Zayre's, slanging produce, and then on the weekends I was washing dishes at this place called Roadkill Cafe. So like I had like multiple jobs. At one point I had 3 fucking jobs and I was still delivering papers up until I was like grade 9 or 10. And like, because like it was so easy, I would literally strap my fucking rollerblades on. I'd be done a paper route in like 20 minutes. Like, I can't, dozens and dozens of houses.
Yeah.
And then somebody quit. We were on a cul-de-sac. So the cul-de-sac was like this, right? So it's like or not a cul-de-sac, but like I don't even know, like a fucking horseshoe of houses. And there was a horseshoe of houses like this. I'm gonna go like this. There was a horseshoe of houses like this. That was my route. And there was another horseshoe of houses in between, or on the other side of like a main drag road. Well, this person here quit their route. And then I convinced the Windsor Star to give me that route as well. And it would only take me like 45 minutes to do 2 routes.
Yeah.
So I would get double the money and double the tips because people used to tip back then. So I was making like decent money doing papers, and it would take me like fucking half hour to 45 minutes a day before school. So
by the time that you were like 22, 23 and Marco presented this package
I had
of 14,
$182,000 saved up.
and that was every penny to your name.
Every fucking penny.
And you never bought a stock or an investment or anything before that. It literally was just sitting in a checking account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I remember this, my mom, especially my mom's family, my dad's family kind of, grew up not poor, but they were, they didn't have really like any money, but, my mom's family was like dirt fucking poor. I'll actually throw up a house here. I'll get Connor to throw up a house here so yeah, you guys can see some context here. And, so she grew up in Portugal, and then she grew up in Harrow when they got here from Portugal. And my grandmother picked tomatoes, and my mom would just like, she grew up here, and they would like, my mom like would stay in the barn with the fucking animals in like a crib of hay or some shit like that to like, because they couldn't afford a babysitter. So
it's wild.
The wife of the farmer would kind of like periodically like check in and shit. So that's how it was. They didn't ask the government for any fucking help, or they worked. And my grandmother actually ended up with 2 rental houses, which one of them I own now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. No license. Like she never had a car so she did all that, like taking the fucking bus, working, picking fucking tomatoes. She ended up with 2 rentals. Like I don't like.
Where's the one now that?
It's off of Howard on Irvine. That's where she used to live.
Oh, wow.
So she that's right. Like she sold so she sold her rentals. This was before I was really getting into the game, or maybe a little bit after, and I didn't have the money to buy them. But eventually when she moved out of her house, that was a house that she lived in off Irvine. After she sold her main house, then she moved. She rented out that house, and she had another rental behind Coachwood Club where I grew up. So I grew up on Ellesmere behind Coachwood Club until I moved to like Heritage Estates area. So, so I ended up buying my grandmother's old house from her, like I don't know, 3-4 years ago. So, and that was like on Irvine, kind of right by like the lumberjack off Howard, Windsor. Yeah. So, anyways. So she did all that, picking fucking tomatoes. Like that's why like this whole mentality these days, like you can't sell me on it. You're not gonna fucking sell me on like all these government handouts and all this. Like go fucking work. So because that's what I did too. So anyways, the mindset, what they instilled in me from a very young age was that life will be better if you have money, and life will provide you opportunity if you have money. So, but what they never really told me was use your money so that it can work for you, as use your capital as a tool. They never did that. They were very conservative. What they would always tell me is like make as much money as you can, work as hard as you can, but keep it in the bank. Right? They never understood the concept of like, okay, well you have inflation. If you have $100,000 sitting in the bank, instead of making 2% with inflation at 5 to 8%, you're losing 3 to 6% every year on that $100,000. Instead, you can actually put your money to work and make 25% if you annually on a rate of return if you were to buy real estate. So they never actually They never really understood that. My grandmother just did it because of the old school Western European mentality of like, well, all the wealthy people in Europe own land and they buy stuff like land and homes and stuff like that, and they rent them out. I don't think it was as deep as, oh, well, we got to beat inflation and this is how like the wealthy get. Like, it wasn't any of that. It was just like, well, what am I going to do with my money? Let's just buy a house or a rental. It wasn't anything like that. So that was the whole experience of me getting into the real estate game. Is I literally, and that comes from like, that money was like birthday money. That was like Christmas money. Like, it got to a point where I was so conservative with, I'm a type of person, I'm very like 0 to 100. So I do remember a point in time in my like late teens where I was like party guy. I would always like want to go out and you know, I had always like new shirts on and shit like that from like fucking Le Chateau and shit when all that stuff was in. So
I remember that.
Yeah. So, but it wasn't like super expensive. And then I'd bring my own alcohol. I used to buy those fucking, you know those Mickeys of Smirnoff?
Yeah.
Right before I go to the bar because they were flat, and I'd throw that shit in my back pocket, right? And then I go buy beer at the fucking bar, and then I go to the bathroom. I take that Smirnoff Mickey, drink the beer, and then pour the Mickey into my beer in the beer bottle, and then I'd sip that beer all night.
Yeah.
But it was a fucking Mickey of vodka. So that's what I would do, like to save money when I would go out. That's exactly what I would do all the time. And back then you'd wear baggy jeans. It was like baggier. It was the 90s, right? Like go look at what people wear now. That's what you would wear. So I would have nobody would know. And people weren't being patted down to go into bars back then, right? So that's what I would do to save money. And then it got to a point where I got a bouncing job downtown, and then this was in like my ultra save money time, where I knew, I knew the school thing wasn't probably going to work out for me. So I had to like figure out how to make as much money as possible so that when an opportunity presented itself, I had the capital to capitalize on that opportunity. That's key. That's huge. A lot of people don't really take that as serious as I think they needed to take it serious, is having the capital available to seize on opportunities. That's a fucking huge advantage to have. So at that point in time, what I was doing was, in order to even make more money, so this is when I was in university, I got a bouncing job, and I was also working temporary part-time at GM because my dad at that time was working at GM, so he got me in. And I was working bouncing like on the weekends and some weekdays or whatever. I would convince my buddies to come to the bars that I was working at so that I could like kind of party with them instead of like actually going out spending money. They would come to my bar, I would be bouncing, and we would kind of like hang out at the bar that I was working at. So I would be making money, they'd be spending money. I would get like free drinks because, whatever, the bartenders would give you free drinks and shit like that. And then I'd be partying with my buddies but making money. So I was trying to do everything. I was trying to make as much money as fast as possible because I had the mentality that I knew if I had the capital available, I could execute on an opportunity that came up. Because this whole like using other people's money, that's great in theory, but I do private lending. There's no fucking chance that if you can't show me some sort of credibility, I'm going to give you my fucking money. So, even from then, I do remember, that whole using other people's money strategy, that wasn't like something that I even thought was a viable option. Like, yeah, okay, fine. That's potentially a viable option, but how the fuck am I going to get your money? I haven't proven you any kind of credit. I haven't done anything to justify you giving me, $100,000. Like who's going to do that? Yeah. So, all these young kids, I think that, the whole OPM thing is like a viable option. Like, show me you deserve it and show me that I'm not going to lose my fucking money. You better show me some sort of proven track record. You know what I mean? And if you can't, that just kind of shows me that you have no credibility. Like I think that using other people's money is a dangerous game. And I also think that it's something that more seasoned investors and seasoned flippers or whatever that, would go in and use that kind of strategy. That should be a strategy only for after you've accomplished something or at least have something to show for it. Yeah. Or even more important, you had better have some sort of collateral to cover a shortfall or if things go sideways, because there's no way that someone's going to give you your money. There's no fucking way. Or you better convince somebody to like co-sign or some shit like that they can go take that other person's house or something, right? Because that ain't going to happen. So anyways, that was my mentality of, instead of relying on some other kind of strategy to weasel my fucking way into getting my first deal done, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to save as much money as I can, so that when that opportunity comes up, I can capitalize on it and I can execute and take action. That was it.
Actually, like, I think one last thing that'd be kind of interesting to add is like how the bank actually, like how you went around getting financing for it.
Yeah. So the way that the bank treated me was not good. Obviously, you can imagine, right?
So you went to them, you had like a package of 14 condos. You're like, hey, here's the fucking financials on it. Here's the NOI,
Yeah. Here's the down payment. I have enough money to cover the down payment. Okay. Well, I remember I actually put a business plan together. So that's another thing too. I put a business plan together and I explained to them, listen, I have the down payment. Any work that needs to be done, I'm going to be able to do it. I kind of, stretch the truth a little bit. Like I know how to, I know how to do repairs and maintenance, which I don't, but YouTube does. So that's what I used as well. I really leveraged YouTube in that time, because I was doing my own repairs and maintenance. And so I sold them on that, and I gave them a business plan. I said, listen, here's where the market is right now. Even if the market goes down X amount of dollars, this is what I theorize rent will go down to. It still will cover. And at what point is the lowest point? Can it really go lower than this? Right? So think about it. I'm buying that condo for $24,000, call it. What's it going to go down? $12,000? This isn't like fucking this isn't like fucking West Detroit where you were buying homes in like $1 in River Rouge. Like that wasn't happening, right? So I knew that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to go down to like Detroit. That's like gangland over there. Nobody wants to buy in those kind of neighborhoods. So I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I was convincing that, and I knew that the banks knew that wasn't going to happen either. So I was basically reiterating what I had heard from the banks and telling the banks that, like, listen, I know that that this won't happen and go down to that level. Even in the event it gets cut in half, rents won't get cut in half. Maybe the rents go down. I think I use a model of like, if the value of the real estate even gets cut by 50% and the rents go down to like, I think at the time, like the average rent in the building was, or my units was like, call it like even like $500 to $800. If the $500 rent gets cut by, like, what's it going to get cut by? You're not going to see rent at $250. You might get cut by, I think I use the theory of like 20 to 25%. It will still cover the mortgage. I'll do all the repairs and maintenance myself. And then I had a business plan for doing light renovations for when people cycle in and out to raise the rent like by like $100 just to update the units. And I told them like, this is how I'm going to do it, and that was it.
And so they ended up loaning on.
Yeah, they ended up loaning the rest of it. And I think I got like a pretty decent LTV. Like, what the fuck is that LTV?
Yeah, 180,
it's not
182 over 938. You're looking at probably about 20%.
Yeah, like 930 or so. Yeah, it was a very good LTV. Yeah, and here's another thing too.
What did it come in at?
It was like 20%.
Yeah,
I also believe that's why I don't remember if that one property was in the 938. Doesn't fucking matter. It's 20 to 25%. Or like it'll be 80 to 75 to 80 LTV. So that's another thing too. Banks don't want to be landlords. Right. So in that time, you got to think like Marco wants to offload properties. In hindsight, he wished he would have kept them, but it is what it is. But, in hindsight, me thinking back to that time, banks don't want to be landlords. So if you're at least coming to them with a decent amount of money and you're providing them a sound argument for why they should give you that money, it's going to be tough to pass up even when times are tough, right? Because they don't want to assume that debt. They don't want to, have that on their books. They're not landlords, right? So, but it was not easy. It was not easy. There's fucking something hanging from my head. It wasn't easy at all. It was comparable for me. Actually, it was probably easier for me getting the original U.S. large-scale multifamily loan in the U.S. It was probably a lot harder than that. Yeah, so it was tough. It was pretty tough. Marco also, connected me with a guy at RBC. Did he vouch for me? Like, yeah, but it doesn't really, like, what's he going to say? Hey, this guy's going to like make good on his mortgages. No problem. Like I have no credibility to back that up. So it didn't come from like, it's not like I got the mortgages because of, someone vouching for me. It wasn't that. I had no credibility to be vouched for. So it was simply because of, I truly believe it was simply because of my ability to spin a good story.
Yeah.
Banks love stories.
Yeah.
They love to know that they love to see some sort of justification for why they should give you the money. And they want to see a story, especially bridge lenders. Bridge lenders love, like, property is worth X amount of dollars. That's what you're buying it for. I'm going to pump in X amount of dollars. The rent is going to be then X or Y. And this is how much money we're going to make, and the value is going to increase, and the rent's going to go up. And they love that kind of narrative. They eat that shit up. Like, I would advise everybody that's a new real estate investor, if you're having a hard time getting lending, provide the bank a story. Provide them a story before you start going to private lenders. Like, don't go to private lenders. I'm a fucking private lender. I'm cutting my own legs off. Like, don't go to private lenders unless you have to. Unless you absolutely fucking have to, or if you're absolutely in a bind. That's only when you go to private lenders. Provide a story. Sit down, learn how to write a business plan. Create a story, but make it not a story. Like, I don't mean like a story where it's like, fluff. Make it a realistic, actual story that this is how you're going to execute this business plan. And this is why this business plan will be successful. And this is how the bank is going to get their money back, and reassure them that that's how.